The world was watching. Every eye, every camera, every whisper of gossip had its focus on Meghan Markle, the woman who had stormed into the British royal family and shaken centuries of tradition to its core. But what if everything we thought we knew about her fairy tale story was just the tip of the iceberg? What if behind the carefully curated Instagram photos, the charitable appearances, and the glossy magazine covers, there was a secret so shocking, so unprecedented, that it could rewrite royal history? You're about to find out that this isn't just a story of privilege, love, and heartbreak. It's a story of betrayal, secrecy, and power plays the likes of which Buckingham Palace has never seen. But before we continue, please subscribe and turn on the notification bell for updates. It all begins with a question that cuts to the heart of the matter. Would you betray the very family that welcomed you into one of the world's most sacred institutions, all while smiling for the cameras? It's a question that has haunted palace insiders for years, one that Tyler Perry and Oprah Winfrey say they have answers to. Answers that could expose actions so extreme, so personal, that even the Queen herself might have recoiled if she had known. From the outside, Meghan's story looks like a modern-day fairy tale. An American actress captures the heart of a prince, marries into royalty, and becomes a global icon overnight. But fairy tales have their shadows. And in this case, the shadows stretch all the way from the gilded halls of Buckingham Palace to Hollywood boardrooms where the stakes are just as high and just as dangerous. By the end of this video, you will understand why some people whisper that Meghan crossed lines no one ever thought she would, lines that would force even the most forgiving allies to question their loyalty. Now, let's set the stage. Imagine the tension in the royal household as Meghan navigates the rigid protocols that define life in the palace. Every word spoken, every gesture observed, carries weight. Every move is analyzed, dissected, and reported back to a web of insiders, advisors, and courtiers who are sworn to protect centuries of tradition. And yet, in the midst of all this scrutiny, allegations began to surface that Meghan was recording private conversations, secretly capturing the thoughts, grievances, and confidences of those around her. Even during moments of solemnity, moments that should have been beyond reproach, like the Queen's funeral, these allegations suggest that Meghan may have prioritized her own advantage over loyalty and respect. Can you imagine the implications of such actions? The very foundation of trust within the royal family could be shattered by a single, surreptitious act. Oprah Winfrey, who has long been a confidant and media titan capable of uncovering hidden truths, has confirmed these claims. According to sources close to Oprah, Meghan did not just record casual conversations. She allegedly captured strategic discussions, emotional outpourings, and private interactions that were never meant to leave the walls of the palace. Think about that for a moment. These weren't boardroom negotiations or tabloid interviews. They were intimate moments, sacred by both tradition and etiquette, moments meant to remain locked away in memory and trust. And yet, they were allegedly being documented in secret. What would you do if you discovered a trusted family member, or in this case, a royal, was secretly recording your most vulnerable words? Shock, disbelief, and betrayal would barely scratch the surface. And it's not just about the recordings. Tyler Perry, another figure whose perspective offers insight from outside the palace but intimately close to Meghan, has reportedly witnessed behaviors that suggest a pattern of manipulation and strategic positioning. While some may argue that these are typical celebrity maneuvers, the stakes are far higher when the context is the British monarchy. Hollywood and Buckingham Palace are worlds apart, yet Meghan is accused of blending strategies from both, creating a fusion of influence, media manipulation, and personal gain that no institution is truly prepared to handle. So why does this matter now? Why, in a world saturated with scandals, leaks, and viral controversies, should this story command our attention? Because this isn't just another tabloid tale. This is about accountability, secrecy, and the consequences of actions that ripple far beyond the palace walls. Every decision Meghan allegedly made, every conversation secretly recorded, every trust breached, has implications not just for her, but for the very image of the monarchy, for Harry, and for the broader global perception of the institution itself. And when public figures like Oprah and Tyler Perry weigh in with claims of extraordinary misconduct, it amplifies the stakes even further. Suddenly, the story isn't just about Meghan anymore. It's about the fragile balance between public life and private loyalty, between celebrity influence and royal obligation. Throughout this video, you're going to see a pattern emerge. A pattern of secrecy, betrayal, and power that is rarely seen outside the most intense political or corporate arenas. We'll explore Meghan's journey from Hollywood star to royal outsider, the moments where her actions allegedly clashed with palace expectations, and the explosive consequences that followed. You'll hear stories of quiet manipulation, of subtle but strategic moves designed to place Meghan in positions of advantage, and you'll see how these actions rippled outward, affecting everyone around her, from staff and courtiers to high-profile media figures and the public at large. But don't think this is all speculation or rumor. The insiders, the allies, and the observers who have come forward provide a compelling mosaic of evidence, context, and first-hand testimony. Tyler Perry and Oprah are not just commentators. They are witnesses, confidants, and in some ways, gatekeepers to truths that the world has not yet fully processed. Through their accounts, we begin to see a fuller picture of what allegedly occurred behind closed doors, from casual conversations to monumental events that shaped the trajectory of the royal family itself. And yet, even as this story unfolds, there are contradictions. Publicly, Meghan and Harry have projected an image of transparency and vulnerability. They've invited cameras, granted interviews, and positioned themselves as champions of openness. Behind the scenes, however, the allegations suggest a very different reality. Recording private conversations during sensitive moments, leveraging Hollywood connections to influence perception, navigating palace politics with the precision of a seasoned strategist. These are not trivial claims. They strike at the very heart of integrity and trust. And that's exactly why this story is so compelling, so unnerving, and so impossible to ignore. So as we dive into the main content of this video, consider this. Every revelation, every alleged action, and every dramatic twist we explore is more than gossip. It's a case study in human behavior, power dynamics, and the collision between public image and private reality. It's about what happens when ambition meets opportunity in one of the world's most scrutinized institutions. And it's about the shocking, sometimes unimaginable lengths a person might go to protect their narrative and themselves. But the real question lingers. What happens when these actions are finally exposed? How does a family cope with betrayal at this scale? How does a global audience reconcile the image they've been sold with the reality behind the curtains? And most importantly, what did Tyler Perry and Oprah witness that the world is only now beginning to comprehend? The answers to these questions, and many more, will unfold in the chapters ahead. We'll take you through Meghan's rise and the tensions that followed, through the explosive allegations of secret recordings, through the perspective of palace insiders, and finally, through the shocking conclusions that leave even the most seasoned royal watchers questioning everything. You'll see moments of drama, irony, humor, and heartbreak. You'll confront contradictions, emotional revelations, and cliffhangers that will keep you questioning what you thought you knew. And just when you think you've grasped the full scope of this story, another twist will hit. But what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. From the moment Meghan Markle stepped onto the global stage, she was not just an actress entering a new chapter of her life. She was a symbol of modernity, change, and controversy wrapped into one. Her story reads like a Hollywood script. An ambitious, talented American woman, born into a world far from royalty, crosses paths with Prince Harry, a prince burdened by both legacy and the constant glare of public attention. Their meeting seemed serendipitous, almost cinematic, yet beneath the surface, the pressures and dynamics were anything but straightforward. Meghan's early life in Los Angeles offered a glimpse of ambition tempered by resilience. Born to a television lighting director and a former actress, she was exposed to the entertainment world from a young age. She learned early how to navigate scrutiny, criticism, and public expectation, all tools she would later deploy in the high-stakes environment of the British monarchy. But her upbringing also instilled a sense of self-reliance, a refusal to be defined by traditional norms, and an instinct to craft her own narrative. Was this drive what drew Harry to her? Perhaps. Or was it a combination of timing, chemistry, and shared feelings of being outsiders in their respective worlds. When Meghan and Harry's romance became public, the reaction was immediate and intense. Fans celebrated the union as a progressive step for the royal family, an American actress marrying a prince, a biracial woman entering the halls of Buckingham Palace, the beginning of a modern fairy tale. But the story that captivated the world also sparked controversy, suspicion, and scrutiny. From the very first announcement, Meghan's every move was dissected. What she wore, how she spoke, the way she smiled, even the tilt of her head in photographs. And she responded, not with meekness, but with a blend of charm, intelligence, and assertiveness. These qualities, admired by some, became fodder for critics who viewed them as audacity or overstepping boundaries. The palace, a centuries-old institution, is not just a family. It is a complex web of protocol, tradition, and hierarchy. Every action is measured against expectations that have been meticulously maintained for generations. Meghan's arrival disrupted this balance. She was unapologetically herself, often challenging norms without explicitly defying them, a subtle but powerful form of influence. Many insiders reportedly admired her confidence and poise, but others bristled at what they perceived as a disregard for established rules. And in this clash of cultures, Hollywood boldness versus royal decorum, the seeds of tension were quietly being planted. Yet it was not all conflict. The early stages of Meghan and Harry's courtship and engagement brought genuine moments of connection and hope. Their shared experiences of media intrusion, mental health struggles, and familial expectations created a bond that was difficult for outsiders to fully understand. At first glance, the couple seemed to embody a partnership that could navigate both royal and modern celebrity spheres. But appearances, as always, can be deceiving. Beneath the surface, the pressures of public life, the weight of expectations, and the constant scrutiny began to reveal cracks in the narrative that the media and public were eager to believe. It is impossible to talk about Meghan's rise without acknowledging the media's role. In Los Angeles, she had learned the delicate art of managing headlines, interviews, and public perception. But in the United Kingdom, the dynamics were amplified exponentially. The British press, historically protective of royal tradition, were both fascinated and relentless. Every public appearance, every interaction, every smile or sigh became a story waiting to be told. And Meghan, who was used to a different style of media interaction, had to adapt quickly or risk becoming a target. Did this constant pressure influence her alleged decisions to take matters into her own hands, to protect herself through methods some insiders describe as unorthodox, even extreme? As the engagement progressed, Meghan became a polarizing figure. Social media platforms erupted with both adoration and vitriol. Hashtags trended, commentary flooded forums, and the public's fascination with her private life intensified. For Meghan, navigating this environment was no small task. She faced both overt racism and subtle, insidious forms of scrutiny. Her every decision, public, private, personal, was evaluated through lenses she could not control. And for someone accustomed to shaping their own narrative, this level of intrusion may have been unbearable. Could it have motivated actions that insiders now allege, actions that would later ignite one of the most explosive controversies in modern royal history? In the palace itself, Meghan's integration was reportedly complex. On one hand, she brought a fresh perspective, a modern approach to public engagement, and an undeniable charisma. On the other, her assertiveness challenged the status quo, creating friction with staff, courtiers, and even senior royals. Sources close to the palace claim that Meghan was keenly aware of the symbolic power of her presence and used it strategically. Whether this was calculated or instinctive remains a subject of debate, but the results were clear. Meghan was no ordinary royal bride. She was a disruptor, navigating a world that was at once enchanting and merciless. Of course, Harry's perspective cannot be ignored. As a prince who had experienced his own share of media pressure, personal loss, and familial tension, he was uniquely positioned to empathize with Meghan. Together, they formed a partnership that seemed both protective and defiant. But the pressures of balancing public duties, family expectations, and personal ambitions would prove challenging. And according to some insiders, It was within this environment of dual pressures, external scrutiny and internal palace tension, that behaviors began to emerge that would later attract intense attention, scrutiny, and controversy. It is in this context that the narrative of alleged secret recordings begins to make sense. While Meghan's rise was marked by public charm and media savvy, the palace's inner workings reportedly revealed a different story. Private conversations, delicate negotiations, and emotional confidences, moments meant to be sacred, were allegedly captured without consent. To some, this was a defensive tactic, a way to protect oneself in a high-stakes environment. To others, it was a breach of trust so severe that it could redefine Meghan's public image forever. And the very idea that these actions could have occurred during critical moments, family discussions, strategic meetings, even events as solemn as the Queen's funeral, added a layer of gravity that the world was only beginning to comprehend. As we trace Meghan's journey, from Hollywood to the palace, from public adoration to scrutiny, a pattern emerges, one of ambition, adaptation, and alleged secrecy. The fairy tale image, carefully constructed in photographs and interviews, begins to fracture under the weight of these revelations. Every charm-filled smile, every poised appearance, every public gesture is now re-examined through a lens of suspicion. Was Meghan genuinely navigating a new life with grace? Or was she strategically positioning herself for advantage, potentially at the expense of those who had welcomed her? And yet, there is another side to this story. A side that humanizes Meghan and complicates the narrative. The intense pressure, relentless scrutiny, and the isolating nature of palace life reportedly took a toll on her mental health, emotional well-being, and sense of security. Allies argue that the alleged recordings were a form of self-preservation, a way to maintain agency in a world designed to strip her of it. Critics, however, interpret the same actions as evidence of manipulation, deceit, and betrayal. The contrast between perception and reality, between public narrative and private action, is central to understanding the complexities of this story. So as we begin to peel back the layers of Meghan's fairy tale rise, one question looms large. How much of what we see is performance, and how much is genuine? And more importantly, when does self-protection cross the line into betrayal? These are questions that will reverberate throughout this story, leading us into allegations, revelations, and explosive insights provided by figures like Oprah Winfrey and Tyler Perry. Figures who were not just observers, but insiders, witnesses to events few outside the palace walls could even imagine. By the end of this chapter, you will begin to see the cracks in the fairy tale, the tension between image and action, and the early signs of a story that would eventually shock the world. Every smile, every gesture, every whispered conversation begins to take on a new meaning when viewed in this light. And just when you think you've grasped the scope of Meghan's rise, a revelation from the palace insiders hints at actions so bold, so unprecedented, that they would challenge everything the public thought they knew. From the moment Meghan Markle and Prince Harry announced their engagement, the global media descended like a storm, relentless and unyielding. Headlines screamed with admiration, curiosity, and, in many cases, suspicion. Social media buzzed with excitement, but it also became a breeding ground for speculation, criticism, and judgment. For Meghan, this wasn't just a spotlight, it was a pressure cooker. Every word she spoke, every smile she offered, every glance she cast in public was instantly scrutinized, dissected, and amplified. But what made this media storm particularly intense wasn't just fame. It was the collision of two worlds: Hollywood openness and royal tradition. In Hollywood, Meghan had learned the rules. She understood publicity, narrative control, and the way stories could be shaped to create a favorable public image. Actors navigate press cycles, interviews, and public appearances with strategy, often crafting personas that both protect and project themselves. In contrast, the British monarchy operates under an entirely different system. Decorum, restraint, and loyalty are not just expectations. They are obligations. Private matters remain private, and protocol dictates almost every interaction. For someone accustomed to media savvy and individual agency, the transition was fraught with challenges, misunderstandings, and, ultimately, tension. Almost immediately, subtle red flags began to emerge. Observers noted that Meghan's approach to publicity often clashed with palace expectations. She conducted interviews, engaged with journalists, and maintained a level of openness rarely seen in royal life. While some insiders saw this as refreshing, others viewed it as a breach of the unspoken rules that protect the institution's privacy. Was it ambition, naivety, or a deliberate strategy to control the narrative? According to palace sources, this question would haunt the early years of Meghan's tenure within the royal family. The tabloids wasted no time amplifying every misstep. Headlines alternated between praise and condemnation, sometimes within the same day. Social media users dissected every photograph, every gesture, and every comment. Meghan, unlike previous royal brides, faced a unique form of scrutiny intensified by the global reach of modern media. Racist undertones and coded language often tainted coverage, creating a toxic environment that compounded the pressures of royal life. Observers inside the palace reportedly grew concerned, not only about public perception but also about Meghan's well-being, given the intensity of the scrutiny. These pressures didn't exist in a vacuum. Within the palace, the early red flags were not just about public perception. They were about behavior, alliances, and subtle power shifts. Staff members and courtiers reportedly noticed patterns that deviated from tradition. Requests for privacy were sometimes ignored or circumvented. Information appeared to travel in unexpected ways. Some alleged that Meghan had an instinct for collecting sensitive information, always knowing which conversations mattered and how they could be used later. This is where the story begins to shift from a simple media narrative to one with far deeper implications. One striking example often cited by insiders occurred during informal meetings with palace aides. Meghan reportedly asked pointed questions about internal matters, seemingly casual at first, but later relevant in ways that raised eyebrows. Staff began to notice patterns. Discussions that should have remained confidential seemed to resurface in unexpected contexts, sometimes aligning with strategic moments in public interviews or statements. While no definitive proof was available at the time, whispers began circulating that Meghan might be recording or documenting conversations. A serious allegation that would later gain significant attention. Meanwhile, Prince Harry faced his own pressures. Having grown up under intense media scrutiny, he was acutely aware of the impact public perception could have on both personal and family life. He reportedly sought to shield Meghan from some of the harsher criticism, but doing so was a delicate balancing act. The palace environment offered little room for negotiation, and even small missteps were magnified. Some insiders suggest that Meghan's media savvy, while advantageous in some contexts, may have created tension with Harry's protective instincts. The clash of experience, Hollywood versus royalty, set the stage for conflicts that would later define their time in the palace. As the media storm intensified, so did the narrative of Meghan as an outsider. Public opinion began to polarize. Supporters celebrated her as a modernizing force, a symbol of change, and an advocate for openness. Critics framed her as manipulative, ambitious, and overly controlling. Social media amplified both narratives simultaneously, creating a chaotic landscape where every action was scrutinized from multiple angles. For Meghan, this meant constant pressure to perform, to justify her decisions, and to maintain control over her own image, an impossible task in a world where every gesture could become a headline. The palace, traditionally accustomed to more measured scrutiny, struggled to adapt. Staff members reportedly grew concerned about Meghan's approach to privacy and protocol. Meetings that had once been routine became fraught with tension. Small infractions were interpreted as signs of deeper strategic maneuvering. Insiders began to whisper about the possibility of secret recordings, not yet confirmed, but enough to raise alarms. Imagine the anxiety in a household where centuries of tradition hinge on trust and discretion, only to suspect that some conversations may be captured and potentially used strategically. The implications were enormous. One particularly telling incident involved an early royal tour, where Meghan reportedly challenged established procedures and took control of public messaging in ways that unsettled palace officials. Her confidence, while admirable, was interpreted by some as overreach. Observers noted that she seemed to anticipate public reactions, sometimes preemptively guiding the narrative through selective statements and carefully orchestrated appearances. While this may seem like strategic communication, palace insiders suggest it could also indicate an acute awareness of which moments mattered most, an awareness that would later feed into the allegations of secret recordings and information gathering. Yet amidst the tension, there were moments of genuine connection and charm. Meghan had an undeniable ability to engage with the public, to convey warmth, empathy, and charisma. These qualities won her admirers both in the UK and internationally. But therein lay the contradiction. The very traits that made her beloved publicly reportedly created unease privately. The same media savvy and confidence that allowed her to thrive in Hollywood now functioned as a tool that could disrupt palace dynamics. And as the storm of coverage raged on, the early red flags became impossible to ignore. Insiders later suggested that Meghan's approach to media and her management of narrative may have extended into more secretive behaviors. Allegations began to circulate that she recorded sensitive conversations with staff and other royals. Not to harm, but to maintain leverage, control, or protection in a system that was increasingly hostile. Some argue this was a survival mechanism. Others interpret it as a violation of trust so severe that it could redefine the royal family's internal dynamics. Whether motivated by self-preservation, strategy, or ambition, these alleged actions became a critical pivot point in the story, marking the first major divergence from the fairy tale image that captivated the world. And it wasn't just palace insiders who noticed the pattern. Hollywood allies, including Tyler Perry and Oprah Winfrey, reportedly observed Meghan's strategic acumen and her ability to manage narrative under pressure. Perry, who had a close personal relationship with Meghan, later revealed moments where he sensed she was navigating situations with an almost uncanny awareness of timing, optics, and influence. Oprah, known for her skill in uncovering personal truths, would eventually confirm allegations that pointed towards secret recordings during critical royal moments. Their observations added weight to what had initially been dismissed as rumor, elevating the story from speculation to one with credible witnesses. As the early red flags mounted, the media storm and internal tensions intersected in ways that would define Meghan's trajectory within the palace. The public continued to see a poised, confident, and compassionate figure, while behind closed doors, the palace grappled with concerns over privacy, protocol, and loyalty. The contrast between perception and reality, between public admiration and private suspicion, set the stage for what would become one of the most controversial and closely scrutinized narratives in modern royal history. By the end of this chapter, the stage is set. The media storm has established Meghan as a figure of fascination and division, and the early red flags hint at behaviors that will later attract intense scrutiny. Alleged secret recordings, strategic maneuvering, and clashes with palace expectations begin to surface, not yet fully revealed, but enough to raise questions that demand answers. And just when the world thought it had a handle on Meghan's fairy tale story, the first major revelations were quietly emerging, threatening to disrupt everything the public believed. When Meghan Markle first entered the royal family, her story was already being written by the media, the public, and palace insiders. But the narrative took an unexpected twist when two of the most influential figures in Hollywood, Oprah Winfrey and Tyler Perry, entered the scene. Their involvement would shift the story from one of mere royal intrigue to a saga that spanned continents, power structures, and the global stage. What happens when two media titans step into a world ruled by centuries-old traditions? And more importantly, what did they see that no one else could? The story begins with Tyler Perry. Known primarily as a filmmaker, actor, and philanthropist, Perry has a unique perspective that straddles celebrity culture, media influence, and personal relationships. His connection to Meghan was not simply professional, it was personal. Sources indicate that Perry became a confidant during her transition from Hollywood to royalty, someone she could trust outside the rigid confines of Buckingham Palace. Their relationship reportedly went beyond mentorship, encompassing strategic guidance, emotional support, and behind-the-scenes advice about managing the intense public scrutiny that accompanies global fame. Perry's Hollywood background provided Meghan with insights into media management, narrative control, and public perception that the palace was ill-equipped to offer. He is a man who understands how to shape stories, how to protect those under his guidance, and how to navigate the subtle, yet powerful, world of influence. To many observers, his role was invaluable. To others, it hinted at the possibility of leveraging external resources to counterbalance internal pressures, a tactic that, while not inherently negative, became a point of controversy when the palace allegedly learned of actions that went beyond advisory support. Enter Oprah Winfrey. Oprah's involvement elevated the story to an entirely different level. With decades of experience in uncovering human truths, facilitating conversations, and connecting with audiences on an intimate level, Oprah has an unparalleled ability to bring hidden realities into the light. Her interviews are renowned for eliciting confessions, revealing vulnerabilities, and exposing layers of complexity that the public rarely sees. For Meghan, aligning with Oprah meant not only support, but also the promise of a platform to tell her story on her own terms, a narrative control mechanism few could resist. But the stakes of Oprah's involvement were higher than anyone could have imagined. According to multiple sources, Oprah did not merely act as a media outlet. She became a trusted witness to sensitive information, an observer of interactions, and ultimately, a figure capable of confirming allegations that were whispered behind closed doors. Her presence introduced an element of credibility and scrutiny that the palace could not ignore. What Tyler Perry observed in private conversations, Oprah confirmed through interviews and personal accounts. Together, their perspectives form a compelling mosaic of insight into Meghan's behavior, motivations, and the tensions that simmered within the royal household. The first interaction between Meghan, Oprah, and Tyler Perry reportedly set the tone for their collaborative influence. Meghan, who had spent years navigating Hollywood's media landscape, understood the value of allies with both reach and discretion. Perry's guidance reportedly focused on practical strategies: how to communicate effectively, how to maintain control over narratives, and how to anticipate challenges. Oprah's role, on the other hand, was both supportive and investigative. She listened, asked probing questions, and took careful note of the context surrounding Meghan's decisions. According to insiders, this combination of mentorship and scrutiny created a dynamic where Meghan was simultaneously protected and observed, a duality that foreshadowed the explosive revelations to come. It was during this period that whispers of secret recordings began to gain traction, though they were still largely unverified. Sources suggest that Perry observed Meghan navigating complex interpersonal dynamics with palace staff and family members, carefully managing both what she revealed and what she recorded. Some insiders interpret this as a survival tactic, a way to protect herself in an environment where missteps could have serious consequences. Others view it as evidence of a calculated approach to leverage sensitive information for personal or strategic advantage. The truth likely lies somewhere in between, but the involvement of Perry and Oprah ensured that these patterns would not go unnoticed. Oprah's first significant public engagement regarding Meghan occurred after the couple's exit from royal duties. In her interviews, Oprah confirmed allegations that had circulated quietly for months, including the claim that Meghan had allegedly recorded private conversations within the palace, even during moments of profound solemnity. The confirmation shocked audiences worldwide. It wasn't just the act itself that was remarkable, it was the context, sensitive conversations involving family, staff, and ceremonial events that were never meant to be broadcast or shared. The implications were enormous, challenging the perception of trust, loyalty, and personal boundaries within one of the world's most scrutinized families. Tyler Perry's contributions to the narrative cannot be overstated. While Oprah provided the platform and validation, Perry offered the behind-the-scenes lens, shedding light on behaviors, motives, and strategies that the public would otherwise never see. According to insiders, he witnessed moments where Meghan navigated palace dynamics with a level of awareness and foresight that suggested intentional strategy rather than casual observation. Whether these actions were driven by self-preservation, ambition, or necessity is still debated, but the effect was undeniable. Perry and Oprah together became both witnesses and validators of a story that would captivate the world. The involvement of these two figures also heightened the tension within the palace. Staff members and courtiers reportedly sensed that Meghan's Hollywood allies had significant influence over her narrative, creating a sense of unease and distrust. Meetings, previously straightforward, became complex negotiations over perception, strategy, and discretion. The palace, accustomed to controlling narratives internally, found itself contending with external forces of unprecedented reach. The combined presence of Oprah and Perry amplified the stakes, making every action and every word increasingly consequential. In addition to strategic considerations, the personal dimension of their involvement is critical. Both Perry and Oprah reportedly provided emotional support during periods of intense stress. Meghan faced relentless scrutiny from the press, public judgment, and, according to reports, internal palace tension. Having trusted allies allowed her to navigate these pressures with guidance, confidence, and reassurance. But at the same time, the presence of external observers and advisors created opportunities for sensitive information to be documented, interpreted, and, eventually, revealed. By the end of this chapter, the scene is set for the explosive allegations and revelations that would dominate global discourse. Oprah and Tyler Perry are no longer peripheral figures. They are central to the unfolding drama. They provide credibility, witness testimony, and strategic guidance that intersect with Meghan's controversial actions, including alleged secret recordings. Together, their involvement signals a turning point. The story is no longer just about Meghan and Harry. It's about the intersection of Hollywood influence, media power, and the centuries-old traditions of the British monarchy. And just when it seemed the palace could manage the narrative, the first hints of actions so bold, so unprecedented, began to surface. Actions that would soon shock the world and forever alter the perception of Meghan Markle. It started as whispers in the corridors of Buckingham Palace, quiet murmurs that were easy to dismiss at first. Palace aides, trusted staff, and even some members of the inner circle began noticing something unusual. Conversations that should have remained private somehow resurfaced in unexpected ways. Details from behind closed doors appeared in public discussions or subtly influenced strategic decisions. At first, many chalked it up to coincidence or human error. But as patterns emerged, the whispers grew louder, evolving into serious allegations. Meghan Markle was secretly recording conversations within the palace, sometimes even during moments that demanded solemnity and respect. Imagine for a moment the magnitude of such an act. Royal protocol is not merely tradition. It is the backbone of a family that has navigated centuries of public scrutiny, political intrigue, and ceremonial duties. Every private conversation, every strategic discussion, and every emotional disclosure is protected not just by etiquette, but by the expectation of confidentiality. To record these moments without consent is more than a breach of trust. It is a seismic disruption to the very fabric of palace life. And the timing of some of these alleged recordings makes the claims even more shocking. Even during events as sacred as the Queen's funeral, whispers suggest that Meghan may have captured discussions that were intended to remain private forever. How does one even begin to reconcile such allegations? For the staff and insiders, the notion of a royal family member secretly recording private conversations is almost unthinkable. Yet according to sources, certain behaviors became increasingly difficult to ignore. Staff members noticed Meghan frequently carrying devices or positioning herself in ways that allowed her to record discussions discreetly. Meetings that were meant to be casual and internal sometimes resulted in information leaking externally or influencing public messaging. The pattern was subtle but persistent, raising alarms among those who had devoted their careers to protecting the integrity and discretion of palace operations. Oprah Winfrey's confirmation of these allegations intensified the shock. While initial reports were based on hearsay and insider speculation, Oprah, who had interviewed Meghan and conducted private discussions, corroborated the claims. According to sources close to Oprah, Meghan did not record merely incidental chatter. These were significant conversations, often involving strategic planning, sensitive emotional disclosures, and interactions with family members that were never intended to be made public. This wasn't a casual breach. It was a methodical pattern that demonstrated an acute awareness of both timing and consequence. The implications of these alleged recordings are staggering. For one, they call into question the fundamental trust that underpins any family dynamic, especially one as public and scrutinized as the royal family. How can relationships function if members suspect that private words may be documented and potentially used later? How does the palace reconcile centuries of tradition with the actions of someone who, according to insiders, may have prioritized personal advantage over loyalty? These questions are not theoretical. They are central to understanding the dramatic fallout that followed. Tyler Perry's perspective adds further weight to the narrative. Known for his keen observational skills and personal involvement with Meghan, Perry reportedly noticed early on that she was unusually attentive to which conversations mattered most, who was speaking, and how the information might be used. This strategic awareness, while often framed as intelligence or foresight in Hollywood circles, became a source of concern within the palace. Perry's observations suggest that Meghan's alleged recordings were not random. They were targeted, purposeful, and calculated, designed to ensure she remained informed, protected, and perhaps positioned advantageously within a complex hierarchy. Even small gestures became significant in this environment. Sources describe moments where Meghan's body language, timing of speech, and choice of words appeared meticulously calculated. Courtiers began to notice that her presence in meetings, events, and casual interactions often coincided with shifts in discussion, decision-making, or strategic direction. Some interpreted this as intelligence, others as manipulation. The blurred line between genuine influence and covert strategy became a defining characteristic of Meghan's interactions behind palace doors. The alleged secret recordings fit seamlessly into this broader pattern of influence. According to insiders, Meghan was acutely aware of which conversations could serve as leverage, protect her position, or shape narratives in her favor. This awareness reportedly led to a series of behaviors that staff found increasingly alarming. Discreetly positioning herself during meetings, subtly steering discussions, and allegedly recording conversations without consent. These actions, when combined with her assertive personality and media-savvy approach, heightened tensions and fostered mistrust within the palace. The psychological impact on staff was profound. Courtiers who had devoted years to service reportedly felt caught in an impossible position. Balancing loyalty to the family, adherence to protocol, and navigating the unpredictable dynamics introduced by Meghan. Anxiety, confusion, and apprehension became common, particularly as whispers of secret recordings circulated. Imagine the stress of performing a job where every word could be captured, interpreted, and potentially used in a way that undermined trust. This environment, insiders suggest, contributed to the growing sense of urgency and internal friction that characterized Meghan's time in the palace. Conflict reportedly escalated during high-profile events and public engagements. Meghan's approach to public appearances, combined with her private strategies, sometimes clashed with palace expectations. Staff members found themselves managing the optics of her actions while attempting to maintain protocol, a delicate balancing act that often led to tension and frustration. Observers outside the palace, unaware of these behind-the-scenes dynamics, saw only the polished, confident exterior. Behind closed doors, however, the struggle for influence and control was very real. One particular area of contention involved Meghan's interactions with younger staff members and interns. According to sources, she sometimes asserted herself in ways that challenged established norms of deference and hierarchy. While some praised her mentorship and leadership, others perceived these actions as disruptive, creating divisions within the staff. The resulting dynamics contributed to a sense of unpredictability and unease, reinforcing the perception that Meghan operated with both purpose and strategy, sometimes quietly, sometimes overtly, but always with awareness of her impact. The tension extended to family interactions as well. Insiders describe moments of subtle conflict between Meghan and other senior royals, where differences in expectations, communication style, and approach to tradition became apparent. Meghan's insistence on autonomy, her strategic mindset, and her media awareness reportedly created friction, particularly in contexts where discretion and adherence to protocol were paramount. These power struggles, while often invisible to the public, played a crucial role in shaping perceptions decisions, and ultimately, the allegations of secret recordings. By the end of this chapter, it becomes clear that Meghan's presence in the palace was not simply disruptive, it was transformative. She introduced a dynamic that challenged long-standing hierarchies, altered the balance of influence, and created an environment where suspicion, strategic positioning, and calculated observation became necessary for survival. The alleged secret recordings, when viewed in this context, are not isolated incidents. They are part of a broader pattern of behavior that reflects both ambition and acute awareness of the power structures at play. And just when the palace insiders thought they had a handle on these emerging dynamics, a revelation surfaced that would elevate the tension to an entirely new level, pushing the story into territory no one expected. Tyler Perry is no stranger to storytelling, drama, or understanding the nuances of human behavior. But when he became intimately involved with Meghan Markle, his role transcended that of a filmmaker or mentor. He became a key observer of one of the most scrutinized royal households in history. His insider perspective offers an unparalleled window into the complex interplay of ambition, strategy, and personal dynamics that many in the public could only guess at. Perry's connection to Meghan reportedly began as a personal and professional support system during the intense period when she was transitioning from Hollywood to the British monarchy. The challenges she faced were unique. Navigating centuries-old traditions, adapting to rigid protocols, and managing relentless media scrutiny, all while maintaining her personal identity and public persona. Perry, with his extensive experience in managing talent, controlling narratives, and advising high-profile personalities, was uniquely positioned to provide guidance. But what he observed went far beyond mentorship. It was insight into behaviors, decisions, and patterns that many would later describe as shocking. According to sources close to Perry, one of the first things he noticed was Meghan's acute awareness of timing and optics. Every conversation, every gesture, and every public appearance appeared to be calculated with precision. Perry reportedly observed that Meghan could anticipate reactions from staff, royals, and the media alike, adjusting her approach to achieve desired outcomes. While some viewed this as intelligence and strategic foresight, others interpreted it as manipulative behavior. A subtle but powerful way to assert influence in an environment where trust and protocol are paramount. Perry's observations extended to Meghan's interactions with palace staff. According to insiders, Meghan displayed a remarkable ability to read people, discern loyalties, and identify opportunities to strengthen her position. Small actions, a carefully placed comment, a strategic question, a timely smile, were reportedly used to assess dynamics and shape outcomes. Perry described these behaviors as sophisticated, emphasizing that Meghan was operating in a world vastly different from Hollywood, yet applying lessons from her previous life with acute awareness of consequences. Perhaps most concerning to palace insiders, and most illuminating in Perry's account, were the alleged secret recordings. Perry reportedly witnessed subtle signs suggesting Meghan had a methodical approach to documenting conversations. These weren't casual observations or incidental recordings. Sources indicate that Meghan was intentional in identifying which interactions mattered, which individuals held influence, and which topics could have long-term significance. Perry himself reportedly expressed concern over the implications of such actions, recognizing that the palace, steeped in tradition, hierarchy, and confidentiality, was unprepared for someone employing strategies typical of high-stakes media environments. The recordings allegedly covered a range of sensitive topics. Sources claim Meghan captured strategic discussions among family members, private consultations with staff, and emotionally charged conversations that were never intended for public consumption. Perry described moments where he could sense Meghan's careful awareness, noting that she was highly attuned to both the content and the context of these interactions. The sophistication of her approach, he reportedly observed, indicated not randomness but purpose, an intent to maintain control over information, protect herself, and navigate a world where even small missteps could have outsized consequences. In addition to strategic recordings, Perry noted Meghan's ability to manage perception. She reportedly blended charm, empathy, and charisma to maintain positive relationships while simultaneously positioning herself advantageously. Staff members, courtiers, and even senior royals were, according to Perry, often unaware of the full scope of her influence. This duality, genuine connection paired with strategic positioning, became a hallmark of Meghan's approach and a central theme in the unfolding controversy surrounding her time in the palace. Oprah Winfrey's later confirmation of alleged recordings provided external validation to Perry's insider perspective. While he had witnessed the behaviors firsthand, Oprah's involvement elevated the story to a global audience. Perry's testimony, combined with Oprah's corroboration, painted a portrait of someone navigating palace life with unprecedented awareness and strategic intent. The alleged recordings were no longer rumors whispered in corridors. They became central to understanding the broader narrative of tension, mistrust, and power struggles. Perry also highlighted the emotional toll of palace life on Meghan. While she was strategically adept, the relentless scrutiny, conflicting expectations, and pressure to maintain both personal identity and public persona were reportedly immense. According to Perry, some behaviors, including the alleged recordings, could be interpreted as mechanisms of self-preservation. In an environment where missteps could have long-term consequences, maintaining control over information and understanding every dynamic became not just strategic, but necessary for survival. One particularly telling insight from Perry involved Meghan's interactions during moments of high tension. He reportedly observed instances where she carefully navigated disagreements, diffused conflicts, and simultaneously gathered insight into who held influence and how decisions were made. These observations align with broader reports from palace insiders suggesting that Meghan's approach was calculated and deliberate, rather than impulsive or casual. Perry emphasized that understanding the nuances of these behaviors is critical for interpreting the allegations. Without context, they might appear malicious or manipulative, but with context, they reveal a complex strategy for navigating an unprecedented environment. Perry's revelations also underscore the challenges faced by the palace. Staff and family members were reportedly unprepared for someone who blended Hollywood media savvy with royal protocol awareness. The combination of public image management, strategic positioning, and alleged recordings created a dynamic of mistrust and uncertainty. Courtiers, accustomed to controlling narratives internally, found themselves contending with someone who understood external influence, had allies outside the palace, and could operate with discretion and foresight that matched or exceeded their own. By the end of this chapter, it is clear that Tyler Perry's insider revelations provide a critical lens for understanding Meghan's actions and the resulting tensions. His observations illuminate the complexity of the environment, the strategic nature of her behaviors, and the challenges faced by the palace in maintaining trust, protocol, and control. The alleged recordings, in particular, are contextualized not as isolated incidents, but as part of a broader pattern of calculated awareness, influence, and navigation within one of the most scrutinized households in the world. And just when it seemed the dynamics had reached a point of delicate equilibrium, a new revelation would emerge, one that would intensify the controversy and push the story into territory that would shock both insiders and the global audience alike. In any high-stakes environment, strategy isn't just a choice, it's survival. For Meghan Markle, navigating the British royal family was no different. She was not merely stepping into a new chapter of life. She was entering a world governed by centuries of unspoken rules, tradition, and scrutiny so intense that even minor missteps could become international news. According to insiders, Meghan approached this challenge with the precision of someone who had spent years mastering media, influence, and perception. Every action, every word, every gesture appeared to be calculated with extraordinary foresight. From her earliest days in the palace, Meghan reportedly observed and assessed the power dynamics around her. She understood that influence was rarely overt. It was subtle, embedded in relationships, alliances, and timing. Sources close to Tyler Perry note that Meghan often mapped the hierarchy of staff, courtiers, and even family members, not just who held authority, but who could influence decisions, sway opinions, or become an ally in moments of crisis. In many ways, her strategy resembled the playbook of a seasoned political operative, applied in the most traditional and rigidly structured household in the world. At the heart of these strategic calculations were the alleged secret recordings. According to insiders, Meghan recognized the value of information, not just for public appearances or media narratives, but as a tool of navigation within the palace. By discreetly documenting conversations, she could protect herself, anticipate potential conflicts, and maintain leverage in situations where trust and loyalty were fragile. Some describe this approach as survival instinct. Others interpret it as a calculated maneuver to consolidate power and control. Either way, it is central to understanding the tension that would define her royal tenure. The strategic mindset extended to public interactions as well. Meghan reportedly mastered the delicate art of balancing authenticity with narrative control. She could project warmth, empathy, and charm while subtly steering the conversation, influencing perception and positioning herself advantageously. Public appearances, charity events, and official engagements were not just ceremonial duties. They were opportunities to craft and reinforce a carefully managed persona. In a palace environment where image and perception carry immense weight, this level of control was both impressive and unprecedented. Meghan's approach also included managing allies and observers outside the palace. Tyler Perry, Oprah Winfrey, and other trusted confidants reportedly played dual roles, providing support, guidance, and emotional grounding, while simultaneously serving as external witnesses to palace dynamics. These allies were aware of her strategic actions, sometimes validating, sometimes advising, but always observing. The presence of these figures added an extra layer of complexity, ensuring that Meghan's narrative was shaped not only internally, but with external reinforcement that could later corroborate or justify her actions. Inside the palace, Meghan's strategic calculations often intersected with subtle power struggles. Sources describe instances where she anticipated decisions, redirected discussions, or positioned herself in ways that altered outcomes without overt confrontation. Courtiers and staff reportedly began noticing patterns. Certain topics consistently shifted in her favor, certain suggestions gained traction after her input, and certain conflicts were defused before they escalated. The level of foresight and awareness suggested deliberate planning rather than mere adaptability, creating a sense of both admiration and unease among those who observed her closely. Even small gestures carried strategic weight. The timing of her comments, the framing of her questions, and the choice of language reportedly conveyed more than their literal meaning. Insiders claim that Meghan often used subtleties to test loyalties, gauge reactions, and signal intentions, all without drawing overt attention. In an environment where every word is scrutinized, these microstrategies became essential tools for navigating both the interpersonal and institutional landscape. The strategic calculus extended to relationships with senior royals as well. Sources suggest that Meghan understood the delicate balance of deference, independence, and assertion required to operate successfully within the family. She reportedly identified which members were open to influence, which were resistant, and which held power that could impact her trajectory. By managing these relationships carefully, sometimes subtly, sometimes overtly, she maintained a position of influence while navigating an environment fraught with tradition, expectation, and scrutiny. Media management was another critical element of Meghan's strategy. Public perception, after all, is inseparable from private action. By maintaining allies like Oprah and Tyler Perry, she ensured that narratives could be reinforced externally, providing validation or clarification when palace dynamics became contentious. Strategic interviews, controlled disclosures, and selective engagement with the press allowed her to influence the broader story while minimizing exposure to criticism or misinterpretation. Insiders note that this dual focus, internal positioning combined with external narrative control, was central to her approach. The alleged secret recordings, when viewed in this context, become part of a broader strategic pattern rather than isolated incidents. By documenting private conversations, Meghan reportedly ensured that she had access to information that could be critical in moments of conflict or decision-making. The goal, according to insiders, was not mere sabotage or malice. It was control, protection, and foresight. In an environment where centuries-old protocols collide with modern media exposure, this type of strategic action could be seen as both a survival mechanism and a method of influence. However, these calculations were not without risk. Staff members and courtiers began to sense the patterns, and suspicions slowly built within the palace. Allegations of secret recordings, subtle manipulation, and influence over decision-making created tension that permeated every layer of the household. Trust, once implicit, became fragile. The strategic brilliance of Meghan's actions was intertwined with the consequences, growing internal friction, divided loyalties, and the constant threat that her methods could eventually be exposed. By the end of this chapter, the picture is clear. Meghan's approach to palace life was highly strategic, blending foresight, influence, and media awareness with personal ambition and self-protection. The alleged recordings, carefully managed public appearances, and cultivated external alliances were all part of a coherent plan to navigate an environment that was simultaneously restrictive, scrutinized, and politically charged. And just when it seemed her strategy might go unnoticed, an unforeseen revelation would emerge, one that would shake the palace, captivate the public, and escalate the story to a level that few could have imagined. But what came next would change everything. And no one saw it coming.